Committee. Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Well, I've had better weeks, Hugh. We don't need to talk about football. I just feel
I sent you an article. Did you see the article?
I did see the article, Hugh.
Now, do you know why we have you on at 33 minutes after the hour?
Because 33 was my number in basketball, so it's lucky.
No, because it's the third segment, and if it was the fourth segment, you wouldn't go for it.
Oh, Hugh. I'm not sure you're in a position to be saying these things.
They walked off the field with Aaron Rodgers. They had no confidence in Aaron Rodgers.
Unbelievable. I mean, I'm sure what I want to know is I'm sure there was some like Moneyball stats nerd whispering in LaFleur's ear saying, you have a 2 percentage point chance better of winning with this move. But it just defies common logic. Everyone assumed we were in 4-down territory there, and you had to score anyways, even if you kick the field goal. I do not understand it, but the reality is we lost that game long before that play just blown.
But Mike, why didn't he run for it? He had the bootleg into the end zone.
I know, Hugh. This will be one of the greatest counterfactuals in NFL history.
Oh, don't you start using that counterfactual word either. President Biden used that. That's a Chris Hayes word. That's a terrible word. Hey, but anyway, we have you on in the third segment because you will go for it. Fourth segment, he won't play. He's a Packers fan. So let's talk about this article I sent you from the South Asia Post. Now, I read the South China Morning Post every day because it's sort of Chi-Com light, right? It's not hardcore Chi-Com. And Eric Schmidt, who founded Google and is one of the most menacing people in the world when it comes to intel. If you read Shoshana Rossoff's book, The Rise of Secret Capitalism, it's not very complimentary of Eric Schmidt. He wants the United States to help Google out. What do you make of this?
Well, I actually look at the report as somewhat encouraging, but just because it doesn't come from the hardcore China hawks, and it's really, if you dig into it, though it's avoiding certain words like decoupling, which I'm not afraid to use, it is saying some of the same things that we on the Cyberspace Solarium Commission said in our March 2020 report and in our supply chain white paper. For example, I mean, you think about this competition with China, and so far, the Biden administration has signaled it's going to learn from the failures of the Obama administration when it comes to, going on the record agreeing with the genocide determination, or, the Secretary of Defense agreeing with the premise of Trump's defense strategy that China is the number one security threat. But values and defense are only two elements of that competition. There's a third that's just as, if not more important, and that's technology. And technology is in many ways the trickiest of the three to manage because there's so much pushback from the business community that has entrenched interests in doing business with the CCP. Now, the Trump administration made critical headway on this front through actions taken at the Department of Commerce, including Huawei, putting Huawei on the entities list and strongly enforcing it through something called the Foreign Direct Product Rule. It also slapped export controls on items going to military end users in the CCP. But it's an open question whether Biden will continue that competitive approach. And there's a real risk he could slide back into the previous status quo on tech, which would undermine the rest of his China approach. For example, yesterday, the nominee to head commerce wouldn't commit to keeping specific controls on Huawei. So this is something we have to look at closely. The one area where I might disagree with Schmidt's comments is that I think we need to think about it more as Google needs to start helping America rather than vice versa. I mean, I think we need a productive relationship with our tech champions here in the United States, but these companies have to think of themselves first and foremost as American companies. And we've seen, particularly with Google, a troubling tendency to sell out American values in order to make a buck in China. So,
Congressman, I had a chance to ask Mark Zuckerberg at dinner one night a bunch of questions. My first question was rather blunt. Are you a patriot? And I believe Mark was a little bit offended, maybe a lot offended. And he said, of course I am. Do you know what we do for DOD? And he went on a long conversation, which was informative. But that is my question about big tech. And when Eric Schmidt produces a report, or a group led by him produces a report that says Washington needs to help big tech, I begin by thinking, wait a minute, big tech is out of control in the United States. And I have been reading A book by a Harvard Business School professor emeritus, Shoshana Zuboff, called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, that's just absolutely chilling, Congressman. And I don't know that anybody quite understands the breadth and depth of the power residing in Silicon Valley. And I'm not sure we want to help them do anything except maybe expropriate them. And I'm a hardcore free market guy, but they now have too much information about us.
Yeah, it's a very difficult dilemma because we're going to need our best and brightest in the tech sector to win the competition against China. But, we can't win the competition against China by out-China-ing China. If we go further down this road of trying to control our own citizenry, trying to surveil our own citizenry, we're going to wake up one day with a social credit score system that's similar, if not identical, to what the CCP is trying to implement in their country. So, I totally
Would you
agree
explain what that is, a social credit score? Because we got Steelers fans listening.
Yeah, well, basically, if you're a Chinese citizen, everything you do online or otherwise is monitored with incredibly intrusive surveillance tools, and that is factored into a social credit score system. Think, just like your credit score in the United States, except it governs everything you do as a human being. And that determines your standing with the party and determines, whether you get access to, a variety of things in your daily life. And it's very Orwell. It's part of this increasing trend of techno-totalitarianism that we're seeing the CCP implement. And this is a critical point, Hugh, because Xi Jinping and the rest of the CCP firmly believe that they can succeed where their communist predecessors, particularly the Soviet Union, has failed, in large part because of the advances that they have made with technology and the ability for technology to allow them to control not only their own citizens, but citizens of other countries around the world. This is a model that is not just being used for domestic control, but a model that they want to export around the world. They firmly believe that they can succeed where their predecessor has failed. And this is something people don't often remember. And it's not just Xi Jinping. It's also the head of key Chinese companies like Alibaba and others. This is sort of their secret sauce, and it's very dangerous. It's un-American. It's antithetical to the values that the free world has long held dear, and it's something we need to be on guard against. And it's something we need our tech companies to understand. Otherwise, we are going to go down that road, and we don't want to.
Now, they do, if you believe Professor Zuboff, and she is a neo-Marxist lefty, so there is some suspicion on my part. Big tech mines our behavioral surplus. That is all the data that is generated in the process of our using the web. Every search, every product purchase, everything that you watch, everything that you listen to. And indeed, this is a stunner, Congressman. 5% of the apps that we download and the terms of agreement that we sign, 5% of them include consent for them to automatically turn on your recording on your cell phone, record and use your voice. That is in the terms of conditions of 5% of apps. So we have this techno giant growing that I look over to China and see what they're doing, which is, nudge theory. They are behavior modification experts, and think to myself, we got to get a handle on Silicon Valley before we worry about stopping the Chinese, because our people are doing it as well. Do you share my concern?
I do share your concern, and I would add another to it. Even where the United States produces software domestically that we feel like we can trust, where there are clear terms of use, where you can opt out of things like that quite easily. Often the hardware on which the software runs is produced abroad, particularly in China. And we are critically dependent on Chinese manufacturing still. Even in the wake of all the lessons learned in the pandemic, we have supply chains that lead back to Beijing that are infected with Chinese vulnerabilities. And it is going to take years, if not decades, of sustained work to shore up those supply chains and disentangle them from China. I mean, we don't. Let me put it differently. We don't. China doesn't have this problem. The CCP has an industrial base strategy. Made in China 2025. Their goal is to dominate these industries. We have a huge dependency that is an advantage for them. And until we achieve a more secure supply chain and remain competitive, we are going to be struggling to deal with our own companies or to create new companies or just to give Americans some sense of confidence that when they go online, they're not going to be surveilled by, a company or the Chinese Communist Party. It is a huge problem. And I know people get very nervous when we throw around words like industrial policy and things like that. But there are areas where we are going to have to take decisive action to onshore or nearshore the production of hardware and software in order to secure our supply chains.
Hey, let me go further. I use the word expropriation. Now, we know what the market value of Facebook and Google are, and that's a $5 trillion investment. It would bring quite a return. But I do believe these warehouses of data, this vast volume of data that has been accumulated, is a national security threat and is a liberty threat. And I don't know that armed services has jurisdiction over big tech, but certainly there are places where your committee intersects with big tech, correct?
This is correct, and there are things we've done in the NDAA to try and get a handle on this. One thing to put on your radar, which is getting ignored because it's such a niche position, is whoever the Biden administration nominates to head the Commerce Department's Bureau of Industry and Security. This might actually be one of the single most important positions for China tech competition, and it's critical that they staff that position with an individual that has a sober-minded understanding of the threat, who can work with the Armed Services Committee to make sure that we can shore up these vulnerabilities. The final thing, Hugh, is I know there's, a lot of conservatives right now are on the bash big tech train, and they certainly make it easy because they've been selling us out. We have to just guard against the temptation to overregulate big tech, because government domination will, I actually think, exacerbate this problem, reduce free speech, and potentially result in less competition and a less friendly environment for the American consumer going forward.
You and I need to have a longer conversation about that, because I'm kind of on the opposite of that. However, the fourth segment's coming up, and I know you got to run to the sidelines.
Wow. Too soon, Hugh. Too soon.
It's not too soon. Oh, there goes Mike. He could have scored in the next segment, but he decided to leave. Thank you, Congressman Mike Gallagher, Green Bay Packers fan, never around for the fourth quarter, never fourth down, not in his playbook. I'll be right back, America. Don't go anywhere except